The photograph is small, no larger than a man's palm. Its edges are worn, curled inward, as though the image itself is trying to hide from scrutiny. It was taken in the autumn of 1901 at the Lancaster Municipal Orphanage for Destitute Children in the northwest of England. The photograph shows 32 children. They are arranged in 4 neat rows on the front steps of the building. Their faces are pale, their clothes are dark, their expressions are uniformly blank, as was common in long exposure portraiture of the era. But there is something wrong with this photograph. You will not see it at first. Most people don't. Look at the second row, third child from the left. There is a gap, not a large one, perhaps 10 inches of empty space between 2 girls. The girl on the left is leaning slightly away from the gap, her shoulder tilted at an unnatural angle, as though pressed by something unseen. The girl on the right has her eyes closed, her lips are parted. She appears to be whispering. Now look at the ground directly in front of that gap, on the stone step. There is a shadow, a small, child-shaped shadow, cast by nothing. The orphanage registry for that day lists 33 children present for the photograph, not 32, 33. The 33rd child was named Edith Mara Linfield, and she appeared in no photographs, ever. To understand what happened at the Lancaster Municipal Orphanage, you must first understand the world that surrounded it. The year was 1901. Queen Victoria had died in January. The empire was draped in black crepe. And Lancaster, a mill town built on damp limestone and Protestant gilt, smelled of tallow, coal smoke, and lye soap. The orphanage itself sat on Moor Lane, a narrow road that ran along the eastern edge of the town, overlooking the River Lune. It was a Georgian building, repurposed, originally a workhouse, before that, a fever hospital. The walls were thick, and they held the cold like a vault. Visitors often remarked on the smell inside: boiled oats, carbolic acid, and something else, something faintly metallic, like old pennies left in water. No one could ever identify the source. This was an era of tremendous anxiety about what was real and what was not. Photography, still a relatively young science, was considered by many to be a kind of mechanical truth. The camera could not lie. That was the belief. And yet, spirit photography was flourishing. Double exposures, manipulated plates, ghostly figures appearing behind grieving widows. The public was caught between faith in the lens and terror of what it might reveal. Victorian medicine, meanwhile, was in a state of confident ignorance. Germ theory had been accepted, but barely. Neurology was in its infancy. Conditions we now understand as epilepsy, autism, or dissociative disorders were classified under broad, useless terms. Hysteria, moral imbecility, cerebral irritation of unknown etiology. Doctors measured skulls. They weighed brains. They believed that the soul, if it existed, could be located somewhere between the pineal gland and the frontal lobe. And they were meticulous in their documentation. Meticulously documented. Every anomaly, every deviation from the expected was recorded in longhand, in ink, in leather-bound case registers that survive to this day. Or at least, most of them do. It is in one of these registers that we first find mention of Edith Mara Linfield. Edith was admitted to the Lancaster Municipal Orphanage on the 14th of March, 1901. She was 7 years old. Her mother, a cotton spinner named Agnes Linfield, had died of consumption 3 weeks prior at the Royal Lancaster Infirmary. Her father was listed as unknown. The intake record, completed by the orphanage matron, a woman named Mrs. Constance Halvergate, describes Edith as follows: small for her age, pale complexion, brown hair, thin, eyes gray, quiet disposition, no marks or deformities observed, teeth in fair condition, appetite poor, a normal child, unremarkable in every measurable way. And yet, Mrs. Halvergate added a note at the bottom of the intake form. A single line, written in slightly smaller script, as though she was unsure whether to include it at all. It read, "Child is difficult to look at directly. Cause unclear. No visible defect." This is an unusual observation, not because of what it says, but because of how clinical it is. Mrs. Halvergate was not a superstitious woman. She had managed the orphanage for 11 years. She had processed hundreds of children. She did not write things she could not justify. And yet, she could not justify this. She simply recorded it. Edith, by all surviving accounts, was a cooperative child. She ate when told. She slept when told. She attended the orphanage's small schoolroom and could read at a level appropriate for her age. She did not cry. She did not fight. She spoke when spoken to in a voice that other children later described as too close. Not loud. Not quiet. Simply too close. As though she were standing directly beside your ear, even when she was across the room. She was, in every sense, a particular child. Normal, but particular. The first anomaly was observed on the 7th of April, 1901, 24 days after Edith's admission. A photographer named Mr. Harold Jessup had been commissioned by the Lancaster Board of Guardians to produce a series of portraits of the orphanage's residents for their annual report. This was standard practice. Visual evidence of the children's health and welfare was considered essential for continued municipal funding. Mr. Jessup set up his equipment in the orphanage dining hall. He used a Thornton Pickard half-plate camera with a Beck symmetrical lens, standard equipment for institutional portraiture. He photographed each child individually, seated on a wooden chair against a plain backdrop. 32 portraits were completed without incident. The 33rd was Edith. She sat in the chair. She held still, as instructed. Mr. Jessup exposed the plate for the standard duration of 4 seconds. When the plate was developed that evening in his studio on Church Street, the image showed an empty chair. The backdrop was visible. The chair was visible. The scuff marks on the floor were visible. Edith was not. Mr. Jessup assumed a technical error. He returned the following day and repeated the process. Same camera, same lens, fresh plates. He photographed Edith 3 more times. Each plate showed only the chair. Disturbed, Mr. Jessup contacted Dr. Alistair Pemberton Graves, the orphanage's attending physician. Dr. Graves was a graduate of the University of Edinburgh's Medical School, class of 1889. He was a practical man, a man of instruments and measurements. He did not believe in ghosts. He did not believe in spirits. He believed in optics, chemistry, and the reliable function of mechanical apparatus. He examined Mr. Jessup's plates personally. He found no defect. He then stood in the room while Mr. Jessup photographed Edith a 5th time. Dr. Graves watched the child sit in the chair with his own eyes. He confirmed her physical presence. He touched her shoulder. He felt the warmth of her skin through the fabric of her dress. The developed plate showed Dr. Graves's hand hovering in midair above an empty chair, his fingers curled around nothing. His journal entry for that evening contains a single word, underlined twice. Inexplicable. Over the following weeks, Dr. Graves conducted a series of increasingly rigorous examinations of Edith Linfield. All were meticulously documented in his clinical journal, which was later archived at the Lancaster County Records Office. On April the 12th, he measured her vital signs. Her pulse was recorded at 52 beats per minute, low for a child of 7, unusually low, but not dangerously so. Her temperature was recorded at 96.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, low. Consistently low. Over 5 separate readings taken across 3 days, her temperature never exceeded 96.8. Her respiration was shallow but regular. Her pupils responded to light, though Dr. Graves noted they were slow to constrict. He described them as reluctant, a word that is, strictly speaking, not a medical term. On April the 15th, Dr. Graves attempted to use a device called a sphygmograph, a wrist-mounted instrument designed to record arterial pulse in a continuous waveform on smoked paper. The device functioned perfectly on every other child in the orphanage. When applied to Edith's wrist, the stylus produced a flat line, not an absent line, a flat line. The instrument registered contact. It registered pressure, but it recorded no pulse whatsoever. And yet, Dr. Graves could feel her pulse with his own fingers. 52 beats per minute. Steady, present. The instrument simply could not detect it. He brought in a second physician, Dr. Margaret Eloise Whitford, a specialist in pediatric neurology from the Preston Royal Hospital. Dr. Whitford was one of only a handful of women practicing medicine in Lancashire at the time. She was known for her skepticism and her precision. She examined Edith on April the 19th and 20th. Her findings corroborated Dr. Graves's observations in every particular. She added several of her own. First, she noted that Edith cast a shadow inconsistently. In direct sunlight, her shadow was present but faint. Fainter than it should have been for an opaque, solid object. Dr. Whitford described it as resembling the shadow of gauze rather than flesh. Second, she noted that Edith's reflection in a mirror appeared with a slight delay. Not a long delay, perhaps a quarter of a second, but measurable. When Edith raised her hand, the reflection raised its hand a fraction of a moment later. Dr. Whitford repeated this test 11 times. The delay was consistent. She wrote in her report, and I will read her words exactly. The child's relationship to reflected light appears to operate under principles I cannot identify. This is not a disorder of the child. It is a disorder of the light. Third, and most unsettling, Dr. Whitford attempted to sketch Edith's portrait by hand, since photography had failed. She was a competent draftswoman. She had illustrated anatomical diagrams for several published papers. She sat across from Edith for 40 minutes, with a pencil and a sheet of Bristol board. When she looked down at what she had drawn, the page contained only the chair, the background wall, the floorboards. Her hand had drawn everything in the room except the child. She had no memory of choosing to omit her. She tried again. This time, she watched her own hand as she drew. She described the experience as deeply disorienting. Her hand moved. The pencil made marks. But whenever she attempted to render Edith's outline, her attention would simply slide away, like water running off glass. She would find herself drawing the chair leg instead, or the window frame, or nothing at all. Her sworn testimony, submitted to the Lancaster Board of Guardians on April the 23rd, concluded with the following statement. I do not believe this child is deceased. I do not believe she is supernatural. I believe she is present in a manner that the human perceptual system and all current instruments of recording are constitutionally unable to capture. She is not invisible. She is, in the most literal sense, unrecordable. On the 1st of May, 1901, Dr. Graves arranged what he called a definitive observation. He assembled 5 witnesses in the orphanage dining hall. Himself, Dr. Whitford, Mr. Jessup, the photographer, Father Thomas Calloway, the orphanage chaplain, and Mrs. Halvergate, the matron. 2 cameras were set up. Mr. Jessup operated one. A second photographer, Mr. Edwin Soames, brought in from Manchester specifically for this purpose, operated the other. Mr. Soames had not been told the nature of the experiment. He was informed only that he was to photograph a child. Edith was brought in. She sat in the chair. She was calm. She looked at the cameras. Father Calloway later described her expression as patient as though she had been waiting for this and knew how it would end. Both cameras exposed simultaneously. At the exact moment of exposure, every witness reported the same phenomenon. The room became cold, not gradually, instantaneously. Dr. Graves estimated the temperature dropped by at least 15 degrees in under a second. The gas lamps dimmed, not flickered. Dimmed, as though the flames themselves were being drawn inward. And Edith screamed, not loudly. That was what made it so terrible, according to Mrs. Halvergate. It was a quiet scream, a scream that seemed to come from much further away than the child sitting 6 feet in front of them. Both photographic plates cracked, not shattered. Cracked. Clean, symmetrical fractures running from the exact center of each plate outward, like the spokes of a wheel. Mr. Soames, who had not been told what to expect, dropped his camera and left the building. He refused to return. He refused to discuss the event. He closed his photography studio the following month and took a position as a clerk at a shipping firm in Liverpool. He never worked with cameras again. When the witnesses looked back at the chair, Edith was still sitting there. Her nose was bleeding, a single thin line of blood from her left nostril. She wiped it with the back of her hand and said very quietly, "It hurts when you try to keep me." Edith Linfield was last seen on the 14th of May, 1901, a Tuesday. Mrs. Halvergate recorded in the orphanage logbook that Edith attended breakfast at 7 o'clock, consumed a small portion of porridge, and returned to the dormitory. She was not seen after that. There was no search. This is perhaps the most unsettling detail of all. 33 children were registered. After the 14th of May, only 32 could be accounted for. And yet no search was conducted. No police report was filed. No notice was placed in the Lancaster Guardian or any other newspaper. It was as though the capacity to record Edith's existence had failed not only in cameras and instruments, but in the minds and administrative systems of every person responsible for her care. Dr. Graves submitted his clinical journal and all associated documents to the Lancaster County Medical Society on the 20th of May. The file was accepted, it was stamped, it was sealed, and it was placed in a restricted archive with the classification aberrant neurological phenomenon, not for general circulation. Dr. Whitford's report was returned to her with a letter from the Society's chairman, Dr. Reginald Firth, thanking her for her thoroughness and advising her, in polite but unmistakable terms, to pursue other research interests. She did. She never mentioned Edith Linfield in any subsequent publication. The Lancaster Municipal Orphanage continued to operate until 1926, when it was closed due to structural concerns. The building was demolished in 1931. The site is now a car park. Mrs. Halvergate's logbook survived. Mr. Jessup's cracked plates survived. Dr. Graves's journal survived. But Edith's intake form, the original document with Mrs. Halvergate's handwritten note about the child being difficult to look at directly, has never been located. The page where it should appear in the orphanage register is blank, not torn out, not redacted, blank, as though nothing was ever written there at all. In 2017, Dr. Lena Sorensen of the University of Uppsala published a paper in the journal Perceptual Neuroscience, titled Theoretical Limits of Observer-Dependent Phenomena in Biological Systems. The paper was largely theoretical, but in a footnote that has since been widely discussed in certain circles, Dr. Sorensen posed a question. She asked whether it was possible for a living organism to exist in a state she termed perceptual superposition, a condition in which the organism is physically present, but fundamentally incompatible with the mechanisms by which other organisms record and retain information about their environment. Not invisible, not absent, simply impossible to keep. She did not mention Edith Linfield.